For a second there, I thought celebrating 40 years of The Empire Strikes Back with 40 video game examples of its most iconic battle would be tough. Nope. Hey, Chris Baker here, ready to celebrate the 40th anniversary of The Empire Strikes Back, my favorite movie of all time, with a look at every Battle of Hoth in a Star Wars game. I've been chipping away at this for months. You could even say since 2004, when I included this sidebar with my review of Star Wars Battlefront for official US PlayStation magazine. It was 16 Hoth games back then, one of which was wrong. Sue me, we didn't have wikis for quick reference back then, and this totally looks like Hoth 5 times over Yoda's stories. Anyway, I was hoping I could get that number to 40 to go along with the anniversary. No problem there. One thing I realized is that not every game with a Hoth level is the actual Battle of Hoth, but these outliers are still a different kind of Battle of Hoth, and there aren't a ton of them, so I'm including them too. The original vision was to include all of these games in one video, but that got really long and really out of hand, so I'm breaking it up into 3 or 4 parts. We'll see how it goes. Here comes part 1, which will get you all the way through the 90s. The Empire Strikes Back from Parker Brothers wasn't just the first ever game with the Battle of Hoth, it was the first Star Wars game, period. Here's a Parker Brothers sales video from Toy Fair 1982 to tell you all about it.
For 1982, we are introducing the first of an ongoing line of Star Wars game cartridges. Our cartridge, based on The Empire Strikes Back, recreates the thrilling battle scene on the ice planet Hoth. Many of its play features and programming techniques are completely new to the market. Imperial walkers storm across a 20-screen action field. By monitoring the radar band, players scan the entire battlefield and pinpoint the approaching enemy. Players use lasers, snow speeders, and the Force to stop the gigantic walkers before they destroy power generators at the Rebel base.
This game is actually pretty remarkable in that it was actually a very new idea at the time to take a scene from a movie and make a video game out of it. It was a pretty solid, if very hard, shooter back in its day, and due to technical limitations, they couldn't do the harpoon and tow cable, so the core gameplay mechanic was something that the film plainly stated could not be done.
That armor's too strong for blasters.
The game looked better and was a little bit easier in the Intellivision version, which is actually where I played it in 1983. I'll always fondly remember it, and I think this guy from a random tips video at the time sums it up nicely.
This translation of the Imperial Walkers scene from the popular Star Wars film shows that Parker Brothers still has what it takes to please the public.
There's a meteorite hit the ground near you. Droid of some kind.
It was probably the late 90s before I even knew that this 1985 Atari arcade version of The Empire Strikes Back even existed, and it was about 2014 at this trip to Barcade in New York that I actually saw it with my own eyes. Of course, now you can play it in your own living room with Arcade 1-Up's cabinet of Star Wars games, but it kind of pales in comparison to Star Wars and blowing up the Death Star. The Hoth level here has you blowing up probe droids and also tripping up Imperial walkers. It's more like a sling than it is harpoon and tow cables, but it's a step in the right direction.
The Force is with you.
Namco's 1987 Star Wars for Famicom never came out to the United States, and is perhaps best well known as the game where Darth Vader turns into a scorpion. Well, guess what? On Hoth, which for some reason is known as Tina in this game, yes, I've actually confirmed that with a friend of mine who works in localization at Capcom, you get to fight Wampa Darth Vader. Your reward? You get to free Chewbacca. Just like the movies. The first third or so of The Empire Strikes Back for NES all takes place on Hoth, and with several different styles of play. You start out as Luke Skywalker on his Tauntaun in what basically amounts to a vertical platformer, kind of a maze almost. One that pretty much requires a turbo button if you hope to get through all the Wampas that take like 1,000,000 shots to defeat as you pass through. Next up, we basically have a remake of the Atari 2600 game, except guess what? You get harpoon and tow cables this time. Gotta love the chiptune Star Wars music too. After that, it's more of a straightforward platformer as Luke makes his way through Echo Base. Not sure how an AT-ST made its way in there, but it's pretty cool to control it. If you've ever played a Super Star Wars game on Super NES, then you know that Super Empire Strikes Back is super hard. Maybe even the hardest of them all. It's also super ridiculous. I don't think I ever made it past this mega huge Wampa that isn't exactly like it was in the film. But I think that ridiculousness just makes it that much more fun, and I love seeing how much more gamification they put into a scene that's already pretty gameable. It starts out actually kind of like the NES game, but a lot better looking and a lot better playing, and then comes the actual Battle of Hoth in a snowspeeder with those Mode 7 SNES graphics. There's even a bit of side-scrolling snowspeeder action, which leads to a pretty creative take on how Luke takes down that AT-AT that took him down. He's not just throwing a grenade in there, he's going in there himself. And then right after that, you get to play as Han, taking Leia to the Falcon. Also, how awesome must Jeff Krosno have felt back in the day? He won a contest in Electronic Gaming Monthly magazine to have his face immortalized in the game, and you see it right here. If you're old enough to remember when Star Wars Rebel Assault came out, you remember being completely in awe of this new gaming technology known as CD-ROM. You didn't even mind that the game completely replaced Luke Skywalker with some nobody named Rookie 1. And you didn't mind the fact that the Battle of Hoth took place before Rookie 1 destroys the Death Star. This was a weird kind of full-motion video game, but we loved it at the time. It really did blow us away. And this completely on-rails version of the Battle of Hoth was a huge part of that.
Coming around.
Star Wars Shadows of the Empire came out just a couple months after the release of the Nintendo 64, and if not for a guy named Mario, I think it's fair to say that this was the system seller. And the thing that made it the system seller was the Battle of Hoth. The conventional wisdom at the time was to have the player control a known character like Luke or Han or somebody like that, but Shadows went with Dash Rendar, who was created just for the Shadows of the Empire event, which also extended to books, comics, even a soundtrack. As a result, this completely 3D version of the Battle of Hoth, the first time that ever happened, which was why it was so amazing to look at the time, acted as a touchstone to a bigger story. It wasn't part of The Empire Strikes Back, it was part of Shadows of the Empire, which just so happened to coincide with the story that we're all very familiar with. The game would later be released for PC, and it was the first PC title I can personally remember that actually required a 3D graphics card to play. As a result, I didn't play it, because only rich kids had those. Okay, I was 20, but still.
Princess Leia steps to Hoth, frozen plains. Some droids get everything they deserve.
You know how there's monopoly for pretty much every brand that exists these days? Up until the late 90s, there wasn't. In fact, I'm pretty sure that Star Wars was the first intellectual property to have its own Monopoly board. And of course, right away, Hasbro Interactive turned around and made it into a CD-ROM game. And for what it was pretty good. You could tell a lot of love for Star Wars went into making this product. And it included 3 locations on Hoth. Really cheap locations, only out-cheapened by the slums known as Dagobah. No offense, Yoda.
Timing is everything. R2-D2 is paying Boba Fett for property rent. R2-D2 is paying Boba Fett for property rent.
Ready? Fight!
Star Wars Masters of Terras-Kazi doesn't have the greatest reputation as a fighting game, but you know what? I played it one weekend on easy, beat it, enjoyed myself. One of the arenas, Hoth. Did it make any sense in the story that was being told? Absolutely not. But sometimes you just want to beat the crap out of iconic Star Wars characters as a Tusken Raider named Hor.
Ring out. You win.
We are ready for your orders, and might I add, good luck, and may the Force be with you.
Some people absolutely loved the incredibly deep strategy simulation known as Star Wars Rebellion, where you could capture Hoth among many other planets, pretty much everything in the expanded universe at the time as well. Others of us, well, we pretty much just didn't get it, so I'm not going to pretend that I know how to play this game. But hey, Hoth is in it, and you can claim it, and you can even command Grand Admiral Thrawn, so that's pretty cool. When I first came across 1998 Star Wars Trilogy Arcade at the Westtown Mall in Knoxville, Tennessee, I was absolutely stunned at how amazing this game looked. Yeah, it's not too impressive by today's standards, and yeah, it's just pretty much an on-rail shooter, but back then, man, my jaw was really on the floor. And one thing I really appreciated as a hardcore Star Wars fan was the inclusion of this Wampas scene that I had always heard about as being on the cutting room floor. Of course, you can see it in the Blu-rays now in the deleted scenes. But this was the closest we ever got to seeing that scene. You could play it. Hasbro Interactive wasn't done with Star Wars games with the Monopoly one you saw earlier. No, they actually released the very clumsily titled Millennium Falcon CD-ROM playset in 1998. This was basically a playset that was the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. It came with its own Han Solo action figure, and you strap this thing to the top of your keyboard. You were supposed to place other action figures in designated spots, but basically they were just buttons that pressed down on certain keys. The game itself was basically Dragon's Lair. They would play actual movie footage and something would blink and you'd have to press that spot on the playset, or just the key if you didn't want to bother with the playset, and then you'd progress basically through all the movies. I really love the rebel agent who gives you all your missions. With an accent I'm not sure I've heard elsewhere in Star Wars.
Navigate throughout the galaxy.
He's from the planet of Canadia, I'm pretty sure.
Good luck. Rebellion is king.
Star Wars Rogue Squadron was a huge hit on Nintendo 64 and PC. The game was completely about dogfighting and iconic Rebellion ships. The Battle of Hoth actually wasn't part of the core campaign, but if you played well enough, or if you had the cheat code, let's face it, most of us use a cheat code, then you could play the Battle of Hoth. Again.
Cable out, let her go!
How many of those did you play? How many did you not know even existed till now? Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell thingy for future installments, which I hope to put out at least once every couple weeks. In the meantime, can you name the game in the teaser image without looking it up? I'll see you next time.